Some time ago, I bought an HO scale Bachmann Wilson and made a tweet joking about putting a LokSound decoder in it. After many days and nights of thoughtful consideration, I wondered why I would buy a decoder worth about 70% more than the locomotive. And did it anyways. I did a video about the Bachmann Chuggington range 10 years ago where I pointed out that the engines are 8-pin DCC ready, which was going to make an installation like this much easier. I recently outfitted my Bachmann Daisy with a LokSound decoder and lights, and while this was a rewarding project, it took 10 hours. I was sorta curious to see if I could do Wilson any faster. The LokSound decoder I bought was a 58420, which has an 8-pin plug. The first step was to open Wilson up. His shell was held down by only 4 screws. I then removed the existing pin and opened up my new LokSound decoder. With a handy visual of how to correctly orient the 8-pin, I could easily see from a far distance the obvious number 1 Bachmann had marked on the plug. However, the plug was put in a pretty awkward spot, so I had to remove a screw from the weights to make it work. After a quick test to make sure that the pin was put on properly, it was time to install the speaker. I used this inexpensive MRC speaker. It's too large to fit inside most Thomas engines, but the perfect size for a train like Wilson. I soldered on the speaker to the decoder's loose brown wires, and it was time for another test, where I got to hear LokSound's extremely realistic default sound effects. After tidying things up and putting Wilson back together, he now had DCC sound in a relatively short time frame, and I now had full control over his pre-installed headlight. Then it was time to load Wilson up with his proper sounds. I started by using the same horn sound from my Roblox Chuggington game, and split it up in Adobe Audition. I needed a file of the horn starting, a loop, and the horn's end. I then took a few lines of Wilson's dialogue from the series and created a few files for them too. The next step was to find a pre-existing sound file from the ESU website. I used an EMD 12-645E3TED2, whatever that is. I liked the sound of the prime mover, as it sounded the most similar to Wilson's from the show. I opened up the file in Lok Programmer 5 and swapped out the horn sounds, and loaded in some completely new sounds. Next, I connected a Lok programmer rented from my local hobby store to a spare piece of Flex track and hooked it up to my laptop. I put Wilson on the tracks, and after 30 minutes of writing sound data, Wilson was ready to go. But his horn wasn't really working properly. The sound sample from the Roblox game was too short, and it was very easy to hear where the loop ended and began again. So with some help from my dear friend John, he was able to source the actual horn sound used for Wilson in the show. With a longer loop and some more adjustments made to Wilson's other sounds, it was time for Wilson to hit the layout.
I'll give my eyes a little rest while I wait for the green light. Ciao, bambini! I'm Milsatini, here with your ice creamy!
What do you think of my Wilson sounds? I'm personally pretty happy with how it turned out. It was definitely a pretty straightforward operation. I'm hoping to be able to show you more from my layout soon. I've done a lot of work to it over the last year, and I know that Wilson will be very comfortable here, and very noisy too.